Hello, people. Welcome to Illo Talk. I am Corey Kerr, and this is 100 Days of Animation, day 87. And today we're going to talk about being rational versus being emotional, and the change that I've gone through in my opinion on what is good and what is bad in those things. But first, intro music. You can see what I'm working on here is I'm still working on the Animatic. Also, in my 100 days, I know I've only got a couple weeks left. I'm actually switching to not making videos on weekends because it's just too much. Videos are really, really time consuming, especially because I'm putting time into making them good. And I know that I'm putting too much time into making them good and not focusing on the animation enough. But anyway, working on the Animatic, and so you can see here all the different things that I'm doing. Also, I have switched my monitor to a vertical setup rather than a horizontal setup. I don't know how long that'll last, but I like it so far. I can see a lot more of my settings below my preview. So I wanted to talk about more existentialism. And as I learn more about existentialism, I just really love the pieces of it that I am taking into my own personal philosophy. I used to think that being emotional or driven by passions was bad or weak somehow, or that it was something less than somebody who was logic driven and who made choices rationally. I've actually come to respect kind of gut instinct and passions. As I've grown and as I've learned, I feel a lot more comfortable with people who, and myself, who we acknowledge that part of our being. We are not. We've often said in our differentiation from the animal kingdom that it's rational and reasonable thinking that separate us from the other primates and mammals. And while some of that might be true, I actually believe it's more of our ingenuity and our creativity that does that. Because I think logically, we don't act logically, we rationalize logically. So the idea that we weigh out our logical and rational choices, sort of like an equation, is just kind of silly, right? The theory goes like this, and a lot of philosophy is based on the fact that we are rational, and the things that we choose to do are the things that we have rationally equated and derived to be the best for us or whatever. And a lot of economic theory is actually based on this as well. But the idea goes like this. You add up the value of all the pros, let's call that A, and you add up the value of all the cons, let's call that B. And if A is larger than B, then you do it. And if not, then you don't do it, right? Seems simple enough. If the pros outweigh the cons, then it's a good thing. If the cons outweigh the pros, then it's a bad thing. We make snap judgments and irrational choices all the time. We're not computers, and we irrationally value things that can't be quantified on some scale other than our passions. Think about love, for example. Think about parenting. From an equation standpoint, parenting makes zero sense. There is way more in a stay-at-home mom's day that is negative than is positive. If you were just to equate all of the hassle and pain and suffering to the few joys that happen, that is not a logical situation. It's a biological imperative. And if you're looking at it from a religious standpoint, it's religiously important. The promulgation of the species or the perpetuation of God's children, however you want to view that, it's really, really important. But from a value-based individual standpoint, many, many days, the pros do not outweigh the cons. It's way harder emotionally and physically and mentally to be able to do that than you get out of it in the short term. In the long term, you hope that your kids grow up and are good people and there's a lot of reward in that. But that reward comes when you are well off into your later years, if at all, right? Everybody has individual choices. So we make snap judgments and irrational choices, and those judgments and irrational choices are gut instinct. Those are driven by our passions. The ancient Greeks viewed passions as something that happened to us. And this is something about existentialism that I really like, is that you are responsible for accepting and acknowledging what is going on with you and the choices that you make according to those things. There are two things that you deal with. There are the facts, which they call facticity, and then there are your choices, right? And the way that you value and view those facts. And I've talked about this in the past, but just a short example that often gets brought up I'm talking about existential theory, is you have two people. Those two people have the exact same past. Let's say they're both criminals. They've lived a criminal lifestyle, and one of them gets knocked on the head and completely loses all memory of his past, right? And we've seen this scenario a lot in books and movies and things like that. So they both wake up on a Tuesday, and the one who has memory of his past feels trapped by his past, feels that he is a certain type of person because of the things that he has done, and continues in that vein and continues moving in that direction and committing crimes and doing things because of who he has decided he is. He has valued his past a certain way and added value to that. The fact that it exists and happens hasn't changed, but the second individual who has no memory of his past puts no value on his past and decides to be a good person that day. He wakes up, has no memory of anything. He decides to be a good person and moves forward and acts according to his decisions, and then later learns what he has done in the past and decides, well, that's not who I am, and places no value on that. So the facts as they exist are there, and we have to grapple and deal with those, but we get to assign what value we put onto those facts, right? And so many philosophers base their theory on the idea that humans are rational beings, and while we can reason and we do use logic, it is, to me at least, silly to state that having an ability is the same as using that ability 100% of the time. I have the ability to run, but that doesn't mean that every time I travel that I'm running. I have the ability to reason, but that doesn't mean that every time I make a choice that it's reasonable. The ancient Greeks viewed passions as something that happened to us. Being possessed by a god, for example, was an act of passion. It was typically something to be avoided. Hercules, being driven mad in a fit of rage, resulted in his slaughtering his family. It was depicted as something that the gods did to him, not something that he did or chose to do himself, that he gave into his rage or whatnot and decided to do those things. In fact, much of our reason comes from a choice by way of justifying our reaction. We call this rationalization. I want to say that last part again. Much of our reasoning comes after we choose something by way of justifying our emotional gut reaction. For example, a quick story. I am not a car guy. I'm not one of those guys who knows a lot about cars, can fix cars. The other day when I broke down on the side of the freeway, I told you that story. I opened the hood, not because I knew what I was doing or that I expected to be able to solve any problem, but because you're supposed to open the hood. Every time I do, I'm always disappointed that there isn't like a neon arrow that points to this button that says, push this button and everything will be fine. Because I don't know what I'm looking at. It's not... I don't know what to do in that situation. So I'm not a car guy, right? I don't know stats. I can't pick out years. I don't have a favorite car or whatever. But when I graduated from college, just a month or two before I graduated, I got a job, lined it up. I was good to go. I knew how much money I was making. And up until this point, I had been very, very poor. Extremely poor in college because I didn't want to go into debt, and very, very poor. And I drove... just massively horrible, crappy cars. I had this van. It was really bad. And so I finally decided that I deserved to have a nice vehicle. And so I said with the money that I was making that I could afford X amount per month, right? And I figured X amount per month, I could pay that off really quickly, and I would do about $5,000 in a car, right? I started looking at cars. And from a monthly payment standpoint, $5,000 wasn't that different than $7,000. And so then I was looking for $7,000 cars. And I found a really nice car for $9,000. And I looked at how much difference that was per month. And A $9,000 car on a monthly payment is not that much different than a $7,000 car. And a $12,000 is not that different from a $9,000, and a $15,000 is not that different from a $12,000. And in a 24-hour period, I went from looking for a $5,000 car that I could own to owning a $24,000 Mini Cooper. And those cars are awesome. But I didn't want a $24,000 car. I let myself get taken by my own rationalization and by my own justifications, and I gave into the emotion of the thing. I really wanted that Mini Cooper, and I'll tell you what, that Mini Cooper was so awesome, and I could tell you everything about it. I knew the torque ratio, I knew the wheelbase, I knew that the differential of the thing would shift the weight of the car into the turn. I could just list off all of these facts. I didn't know any of those facts before I bought that car. Do you know why I learned those facts? I learned those facts so I wouldn't look like an emotional idiot, so I wouldn't look like I made a snap decision and just subjugated myself into debt and slavery to this vehicle without thinking it through. The rationalization of my choice came after the emotion of the decision to justify the emotion. So, does this mean that we are slave to our passions, whims, and impulses? No, but they are a component of our thinking and decision-making process. We can also change, improve, and diminish certain impulses through our choices. We are our actions and choices. We are what we choose to do. And we are a giant bundle of habits. And those habits and those impulses and those desires, they come from and derive from the things that we choose to do, the things that we choose to spend our time doing. And so all of this is to say that I used to think that people who acted emotionally were morons and they were dumb and we hate them and they're stupid. And I've come to realize that we all act impulsively and we all act according to passions, and that passions are not something to be derided, but they're something to be acknowledged, respected, and channeled. And so, for example, if you take fire is an incredibly useful thing, but it is also incredibly destructive. And so I've got a couple notes here that I keep checking, but if you take fire and you just let it out and let it do its thing, it will burn and destroy everything. But if used in the right situation in a controlled environment with certain constraints around it, that fire will give you heat. It will fuel your home. It will do a number of good things, right? And so be authentic with yourself and address the fact that you are both a rational and a passionate being, that both your mind and your heart come into play into what you choose to be. What you choose to do and who you are made up of both mind and heart, right? The passions and the reason. And embrace the passions as motivations and driving forces, rather than thinking of them as something that shackles and binds you, but respect them as you would respect fire. It's hot, it's powerful, and useful. Fire cooks our food, warms our homes, and powers our combustion engines, but left unchecked, unencumbered, or worse, ignored, or we pretend like it's not there, fire will burn and destroy and consume everything around it. So it is with the passions. Used and respected and acknowledged, passions will drive our art, fuel our relationships, and inform our choices. But left unchecked and not balanced with reason, our passions and impulses will degrade and destroy everything around us. And so, anyway, just some thoughts that I've come to respect and acknowledge that I'm a passionate individual and that as a human being that I have passions and emotions, and those are okay. And actually quite useful as long as I keep them in check and as long as I balance them with reason, but I don't let reason or passion overcome or become the ruler of my decisions. And with that, I think you can have too much of a good thing or too much of a bad thing. So one of the reasons why I am balancing a little bit and not doing videos on the weekends is because I'm still going to be doing my art and I'm still going to be doing my stuff. But the videos and the drive they were taking up too much. And I was a little bit unbalanced. And so you will get 5 videos a week instead of 7. And hopefully there'll be better videos because of that. Anyway, I'm curious on what you guys think about passion, emotion, rationality, justification, logic, and reason, and creativity. And let me know in the comments what you've done to give into or contain or curtail or change or drive any of those things in your life. So that's that. Anyway, we'll catch you guys tomorrow. As always, you can catch my stuff at coreykerr.com. And I have launched a brand new store, which I will tell you about in tomorrow's video. But you can always go to coreykerr.com and click on buy to get a little sneak preview of that. It is live and up and running today, and it's got good stuff on it. So check that out. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and leave a comment and like and subscribe and all that jazz. And we will catch you guys tomorrow. I'm out.